I'm Dave Wiesdock, Sage of Creative Scaffolding.
And I'm Jen West, Professional Rebel of Delight.
And this is Shadowcasting. Hey Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. How are you today, Dave?
I am doing great. You know, I was listening to a podcast over the past week. It was Tim Ferriss, and he was interviewing Boyd Varty. Have you heard this podcast before?
I haven't listened to it, but I've listened to another one where they reference him, so I desperately want to.
Yeah, so a little background, Boyd Varty is a tracker in South Africa, and his parents spent pretty much every dime they had to open up this reservation in South Africa to have tourists come and learn how to track animals. And it's this really awesome story. So I don't even want to try to butcher it. But if anyone listening hasn't listened to that podcast, I highly recommend it. It's one of these unique interviews that Tim does where he doesn't take someone kind of, I don't want to say cut from the same cloth, but that's the analogy that comes to mind. You know, it's not another Tim Ferriss he's interviewing, which are also always great podcasts. It's someone kind of literally off the beaten path. You know, he runs essentially a tracking safari where they go and they track leopards and lions and elephants. And he talks about how they overnight stay out in the open sky, you know, and every few hours someone rotates taking watch to protect the group. And it's a very naturalistic and earthy experience. And as he was talking to Tim, he said this quote, and it's his words. And I just thought that this would be an awesome quote for us to discuss this week.
All right, let's dig in.
Yeah. So with all that in mind, Boyd said, mastery, as I define it, is the ability to be yourself in any situation.
That's powerful. That's a big one. I was waiting for something else. Mastery, be yourself. Yeah. Was not expecting that.
No. And intuitively, it almost makes too much sense. I think about my own journey and how I am constantly on the quest for self-improvement. That's how you and I met. It was this internal drive of mine to always improve, always find the next book, the next podcast, the next quote, something to benefit my life and grow. And one of our mutual friends asked me something along the lines of, what am I improving for? Or what am I growing towards? And I didn't really have a great answer. And I'm not sure that mastery is the right word, but it captures the energy behind it. I am trying to improve myself, not so that I can be this egotistical, I'm spiritually grown person. I really think it's the essence of what Boyd's talking here. I am improving and growing in myself so that I can master myself, so that I can be present no matter what's happening around me. It is really hard. It's easy to be yourself when you're in a situation that's enjoyable, when you're with people that raise your spirits, or you're watching a comedy, or you're out with your pets and they're loving on you or walking with you. When you're in these moments that fill yourself or your soul with gratitude, it's easy to be yourself. When you're in these moments that are hard, that are difficult, where there's struggles in life, and we all experience that, it's harder to be ourselves. We default to our habits, our behaviors, our patterns that are innate and unconscious in us. And so tying this together, mastery, extrapolating kind of where Boyd was going with this, mastery is that ability to be present in every situation, to bring yourself fully into that, and to act from a space of, dare I say, balance. Maybe we'll get there another time. What are your thoughts on the quote, Jen?
I keep going back to our idea of personal growth. And I think that can be misconstrued, because what we're really doing is we're breaking off all the layers that society and our parents and our family and trying to get down to the root of who we are. Personal growth, another way to say it, may be personal expansion. Like the part that was always us is finally given light and nurtured, and that's why it's called growth. But I think sometimes that goes in a direction of we're creating something instead of uncovering it. Like I've got to personally grow, so I need to get good at this thing and that thing. And it's more about one, becoming present. I think the end of what you said is spot on. It's just being here and in the moment, but getting all of that extra stuff off, like shaking it all off and then letting yourself shine out in the best, kindest possible way. And I think that's what Boyd is saying. I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but I think that's where he goes is I am me at my best in every situation, but it's me. It's always me. You always get Boyd.
Right. It's that concept of you bring yourself with you wherever you go. And so learning about yourself is really important because that's who you bring. This awareness that you develop over time is, I think, a first step towards that mastery. It's that ability to recognize a situation has arisen, to recognize that you instinctively want to behave in a certain way, and having done so much work that you catch it before you act on that pattern of behavior, before you act on that habit, and really leaning more into the question of, I understand the situation is before me. I understand this is how I want to act, think, or behave. Is this how I really want to proceed? To really just have that crystal clear moment of pause. So, a little bit more about where this quote came from. Boyd brought it up. He wasn't even talking about himself, interestingly enough. He was actually talking about a fellow tracker that went on a trip with a group of, with his group. And this other tracker was a self proclaimed master. And they kind of share a story about how he did these things that would otherwise make you kind of scratch your head or maybe make you wonder if this guy was a little bit more adventurous than maybe most of the people in the group would be. For example, he went at, as they talk about, he went at like high noon to go track a leopard in Africa. So if you put yourself there, high noon is the hottest it's going to be during the day. And they talk about how because it's high noon, it's also harder to track because of the way the sun hits the earth. It removes almost all shadows, which is interesting from a shadow casting perspective, but it removes all shadows. And so when they see a print, it's actually harder for the tracker to view and understand how that print is or what that print is showing them. And so when the shadows start to form on the paw print, for example, they can see things like, did the leopard make a sudden left turn? Did he start sprinting? Did he, start backtracking? Did he go hide? And all these things, these trackers start to learn over time. And so this tracker that thought he was a master was able to actually go track this leopard in the most impossible circumstances, and he found it. And when he radioed back to the group that he found the leopard, apparently his sign off was, I am the master, just that self-confidence and self-assuredness. And I just laughed thinking about it because he shared that story after he said the quote about master being yourself in any situation. I think where Boyd was going with this is that this specific tracker was being true to himself. He was there to track. That was his goal. And he wanted the challenge. And so he wanted to show that he was the best. And I put that in air quotes because he was going to go track this leopard in the hardest situation or the hardest circumstance. And so rather than, and this is where this ties together, rather than using the hard situation as the excuse, he used it as the reason. And I think that is where the self-mastery comes in. When you can move from a space of, this is hard. Brene Brown talks about this all the time, right? Soft front, hard back. When you're in the hard situations, it's that ability to go, okay, this is hard. I can either shrink from this or I can rise to the occasion. And
Yeah, this
go
is
ahead.
putting a different spin on it for me too, because where he's talking about fully being yourself, it's really rising up into your talents and pushing them and making them the very best that they are. This trap master tracker was like, yeah, I can track animals and I can do it when the sun's hitting the animal tracks just right. Let's see if I can do it the worst part of the day. Because if I can do it then I am really good at my craft. And that's a cool way to look at it. You know, it's like push yourself. We're always looking at our weaknesses and trying to make them that much better, you know, just that little minuscule better. And instead, take those things that you are just talented at, that you find flow in, that you think everybody's good at, and make it that much better. Push yourself in out of your comfort zone of your talent and make it better.
I really love that. And I think where I see this is that is how you show up as yourself, is when you show up with your talents. You brought up a great point. We all have weaknesses. This guy has weaknesses, but he chose to focus on his strengths and use them in a hard situation. That's him showing up fully. Fully as yourself is self-mastery, because that is what you're trying to do. You are trying to uncover all the muck of the patterns, habits, and behaviors that you have. So that way, when a situation arises that's easy or hard, you can make the choice of how you want to be present in that situation. You are coming from a place of choice rather than default behavior. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to strive for. What are you good at? Who are you internally? What's your personality? And what do you want to give to the world? Remember, we're casting our shadow out to, you know, celebrate humanity more. So bring us more of you, because we don't need me or more Daves. We've got us covered. Be you.
That's right. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. As you're listening to this podcast, think of a time where you were recently handling a difficult situation. How did you show up? Were you coming from a place of choice and self mastery, or were you coming from a place of pattern and habit? And whichever happened, honor that. Don't judge it. Just be with that and recognize that as a choice. And then the next time a situation similarly shows up, recognize you have the power to make a different choice in that situation if you want. And as always, make sure to comment, like, subscribe to our podcast wherever you're listening from.
Until next time.
See ya.